I mainly play piano, but in church I learned how to play the bass and the drums, so I kind of can like be solid on the rhythm section instruments.
Yeah.
Um, and you said my background as well. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I grew up playing in church. That's how I learned mostly. My dad also grew up playing in church, so he taught me how to play.
Mhm.
And he also went to school for classical piano performance. So he taught me that as well. So I went to school for composition, but my principal instrument was the piano. Sorry, close my window.
Sorry.
And there you go. And so yeah, so I went to school for composition, but piano was my principal. And but I always had like a gospel jazz kind of uh, foundation uh,
Yeah.
playing. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Um, and then like what was you said you went to school for composition. Was that because that's the direction you were already kind of headed, or because you wanted to like you didn't have that in what you were currently doing, you wanted to add it in? Like was that what was missing, or
Um,
what was the?
no, it was something that I always wanted to do. I always loved doing. I was
Mhm,
always composing. I always wanted to write for film actually, and so
mhm,
I ever since I can remember, I loved watching like Disney movies. Beauty and the
mhm.
Beast, my favorite, just because of the score. And my parents even said, even when I was a little kid, I would try to pick out the melodies that I heard from movies and stuff. So
Yeah.
always a dream of mine to write for movies and to compose for large orchestras and stuff. Uh,
Mhm.
and the yeah, going to school was just I always knew I wanted to do that in college.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was always my thing. Whether or not I play piano was something that was I would go back and forth about, but composing was always gonna be my
Huh.
thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So moving back a couple a couple spots because we need to. Rhythm section means what?
Room section is the section in the band that holds down the chords and the beats basically.
Mhm.
Or if you're a bass player, it's like the root notes, but it's
Yeah.
usually keys, bass, drums, guitar. Usually those are the rhythm section instruments. Yeah.
Yeah. And then other stuff gets thrown on top of that to decorate it and expand the harmonies and stuff for horns
Or
and strings.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So then, that's kind of your background is all that stuff that makes up the rhythm.
Right.
And then you go into composition. So for my students, a lot of them want to be songwriters, and then there's like composition sounds like an orchestra.
Right.
So
Right.
so what are you focused on, and what is their approach? I haven't heard. I didn't spend any time doing composition
Mm,
in school, and I haven't heard anyone explain like what does it look like in a composition program?
right. Composition is a lot about you know anyone who can perform. I think, or and has a sense of theory can compose. Uh,
Yeah.
but or can I should say can like kind of write some notes and stuff. But composition is more about that and the colors that you can make with sounds, with different sounds of instruments. So one thing I learned right away going to college was about timbre.
Mhm.
When I compose, I used to just I loved writing for strings, so I would just put some melodies with the strings, and that'd be it for me. And
Yeah.
I would. But one thing I learned pretty quickly was that there has to be a foreground, a middle ground, a background, and if you're composing for an orchestra, what section has what function, and what sound are you going for? So what instruments put together to go for that sound, and then
Yeah.
even things like what instruments are generally louder or softer than other instruments. So even if you put a flute or you have a viola section play forte, if you have if you want that to be the foreground, but then you have the horn section playing something else, they're going to overpower the viola section. So
Right.
you can't just put whoever you want wherever. You have to think about the natural ability of the instrument itself.
Right.
Uh, and then
Real
yeah,
quick, I'm sorry
yeah,
just make sure everyone's following the same page too. So timbre is like the quality of the sound, or the what makes. Go
right.
ahead. You
Yeah,
tell.
timbre is like it's um the timbre of something is almost it's like what sounds coming together sound like. It's like a mixture of sounds. So if we're talking about strings and saxophones have a similar timbre.
Mhm.
They have similar qualities to them, and when you put them together, they sound. It just sounds like a emboldened version of themselves. Like it makes them both sound a little bit bigger, as
Yeah.
opposed to putting strings and horns together where they have completely different timbres, and you'll get a different type of sound when they come together.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Cool. Yeah,
yeah, but
I've never considered like the timbre of like a mix of instruments before. I like that when you say timbre, you go like that because that's totally how I feel. It's like the timbre of a saxophone. Or
are coming out. I mean, that's what he does all the time. Like when you put the sounds together, like,
yeah,
yeah,
it was a revelation to me. Like when because I've just compared them like the timbre of a saxophone to a human voice or something like that, and how they sound more similar than you would expect a chunk of metal and a chunk of flesh to sound.
Right,
But then the sounds have the same kind of richness.
exactly.
Whatever. But then, but you're talking about like when they come together, you get strings and saxes together, and then the timbre that combination makes. That's really interesting to me. So then, can you tell me like more down that path about how you would mix things to create different timbres and colors and textures, however you want to.
Yeah. No, that's one of my favorite things to do, especially when I do a lot of arranging for artists, like taking their songs and either transforming them to a orchestra version or just adding something to their, like adding strings to their songs. And one of the things I love to do is figure out, what the character of this section of this song is. If it needs something kind of light and bouncy and happy, then I like to do stuff like mixing a flute with some sort of pitch percussion instrument like a vibraphone or something, and those two things together really have it's always a light playful timbre, especially with the flute. That hit gives the flute, even though the flute doesn't change how it sounds, but that extra hit makes the flute sound like it has a little bit more punch to it.
Right.
And
wow.
Yeah, it's those are awesome. That's always that's one of my favorites to kind of mix together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then another one is strings and saxophone, actually, is because they make each other sound a little bit bigger. They, believe it or not, even though they sound different, or we tend to think that they have a completely different sound, it's actually similar enough. So if you put them together, it has a nice blend. They just kind of they strengthen each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I've always thought that has something to do with like the overtone series or something like that. What else goes into the timbre of an instrument?
Yeah, I mean, that has a lot to do with it. The overtone series. So what notes resonate in certain ways, and how based on like the size of the instruments and all that stuff. Just almost like when you go into a public bathroom, and you find that note that makes like
right.
the stalls shake a little bit. It's that same thing, that every instrument has that resonance point, and so some instruments have the same point. So in certain points in the overtone series, they resonate in the same way. So when they play together, it just kind of like punches it even more. So over time, I think I've learned about that on paper, but what helped me to remember just how things sound is just by doing it. By having the chance to. That was my son, by the way. So,
awesome.
Having the chance to write and then have people play my pieces right in front of me, and hearing what works, what doesn't work, and all that stuff really does make a huge difference. But yeah, no, that definitely plays a huge part in it, though. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How does that feel? Like, are you when you write for a group and they're performing the stuff? Are you usually the one conducting them? How does it feel to have your kid out there? Like acting on its own, and like, do you ever feel like, no, that's not the way that's supposed to sound, or like, what's that experience like?
It's an out of body experience, kind of. I remember the first time that happened. I was in school, in college at University of the Pacific, and I had one of my pieces performed, and it was even more nerve wracking than actually performing myself. For some reason, I was sitting there, and I realized as they were playing, it was a duo, like a saxophone piece. So it's just two people playing saxophones. And I realized that if someone made a mistake or something, there was nothing I could do. Like, I knew that they were good, but I was like, wow, I have zero control over this situation right now. Like, the two individuals, one of them could just decide to not play anymore and just walk away. And like, And I knew that was going to happen, but so I think for me, I've never been it's always been a learning experience for me to see people play my stuff on stage. The balance between no, that's not how I wrote it, and maybe I wasn't clear enough in my writing. Maybe they're interpreting it this way because I didn't give enough, instruction.
Right.
So I think with each time I get a chance to compose and perform, usually when I'm performing, I'm playing keys, so I'll sort of conduct, but I'll mostly just give cues from the keyboard.
Hmm.
Um, uh, that it informs me each time that, okay, one, there's some things you have to make sure you really put on the paper, but then two, in rehearsal, you got to make sure that you give them those notes.
Hmm.
So what helps me over the years is figuring out what people are what is possible with the instrument, and then so whether or not I'm asking too much of someone, or whether I can actually push them and say, no, I need you to play it like this. And that was always something I wasn't very good at starting out, because I just was still learning how everything worked in real life. But now
Right.
I have a better handle on, okay, I think you guys can actually do a better job of doing this. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Versus it's like, oh, I guess that's just how it goes. I'll just leave it.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's always a struggle every time, but it gets better each time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you get any experience actually playing? Like, are there instruments that you write for that you've never played before?
Absolutely, yeah. Most of the orchestral instruments I've never played. One of the things that we had to learn, yeah, we had to take two different orchestration classes in college, and that helped me learn each instrument. And then because I loved the community I had in college, I was just able to ask students. Like, I'd be writing stuff, and I'd be like, "Hey, is this possible for you to
Hmm.
play on your oboe?" Or so, like, there's certain things I know that like, for instance, the oboe doesn't have a very big range.
Okay.
So you don't want to put it too high up in its register unless you have like a super expert oboe player, because it's gonna crack. Even if you have
Right.
a really really good college student, you might just be prepared for hearing some cracking and some just little
Right.
things that clarinets sound their best in their lower register because it's nice and warm and
Right.
uh,
Well, and real quick, when we talk about register, we're talking about the each instrument just has a specific range of notes that it can possibly hit, and so the
right.
upper part of the register is the top part of their instrument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you have your range where it's doable and it sounds great, and then you have it's more difficult and it can still sound pretty good if you have a good player, and then you just have like it's ridiculous. And
Right.
especially down here too, like it's too low or it's not possible.
Right. Right. On piano, we just our students, it's like you can either press the button or not press the button. There
Right.
aren't like
I
any
can
buttons
play
that you can't. Right.
exactly. And that's what I have to learn right away. It's like, yeah, it's not a piano. Like, they have to actually work harder to do this, whereas
Right.
you can play up here or down here, it doesn't matter. But yeah,
Yeah. Kind of like a vocal range. Like there are high notes that you can kind of hit, and then ones you definitely can't hit.
right, right.
Yeah.
But then there are times when you do want a specific sound. So going back to timbre, like, I love hearing cellos in their higher register because it's had this nice warm, like uh, it's like a melancholy kind of sound. It's very lush though.
Hmm.
So sometimes you'll have a line that's played and you go, okay, this actually would be perfect in the viola section because this is right in their range. But I don't want that sound. I want the sound of a cello playing in their higher range, because that
Right.
has more of a pulling feeling than viola playing in their range would be nice. It's a nice line, but I want that like longing, feeling. And
Hmm.
when cellos do it, it just so there are times when you do want to, cross ranges. I want the cellos to play higher than the violas right here, just like
Hmm.
out. But it has to be coordinated. You have to know that's what you want to do.
Right. Right.
When you do that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, what does the actual program look like? Like how is it pretty much just like if you want to compose, like do they just make you do a lot of composition, or are you doing transcribing stuff, or what's the
Um,
program actually look like?
well, so when I was there, and I think it's still the same now, your freshman year, they start you off usually with a small, like, two people. And it's two instruments that can't play chords, so two melodic instruments. So
Hmm.
usually, like, I had two saxophones. So that really pushed me because I loved working with harmonies and, like,
Right.
I love all that stuff. So my first assignment, I was like, "Are you serious? Like,
I'm
most
John Williams. Let me compose.
come on!" So that one was tough. And then the second one I got was a trio, and it was clarinet, violin, and oh wow, no, yeah, oboe, bassoon, and violin. That's what it was. So it was an interesting trio, and I was able to have the violin do double stops. Like double stops is when they play two notes at once. You know,
Right.
there are ways they can do that. But again, you have to know what you're doing because there's certain intervals, certain spaces between the notes that they can play easily, and certain ones that are almost impossible
Right.
to play. So you have to know where you want them to go and where on the strings that is. You know, so I can't play violin, but I still know what the strings are, and so okay, if they did this, it would be more difficult. So I'll write it like this so that they can is right there. But that was fun because it forced me to think in that way, and I could do some harmonies and stuff. And then they kind of progress you from there. So by the time they got to my junior year, I had to write a piece for Unpitched Percussion Ensemble. So no melody, no harmony.
Right. Unpitched just means like
no, so vibraphone or xylophone would be a pitch percussion, but unpitched is like any drum that's like tom, snare, bass drum, cymbals. We use some clap, have people clap and stuff, and shakers and things like that. And you could be creative. I brought some other elements in there, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it couldn't be pitched though. As long as there were no actual melodies, then it was fine. So and then I wrote some things I didn't get performed, like I did a choir piece and all that. But my senior year is when they gave me I had my senior recital, and I wrote an orchestra piece along with a bunch of other pieces and some stuff I brought my band in and did some stuff with an orchestra. And that was the first time I had a band orchestra project. And after that, I was like, I want to keep doing it. That's the best thing ever. But yeah, they really start you off. And the professors are really good with knowing where you want to go in your composition sound wise and helping you get there, even if that's not the style that they're used to. So they help you find what your voice is, and then they push you in that direction. So my professors were really, it just so happened, I fortunately had a professor who loved timbre and color as much as I did. So that was easy for him, but it was definitely a learning experience for me to just technically get that kind of education. It's helping me a lot now too. So
yeah, it seems like that'd be frustrating. Like you're talking about going in and like very like Karate Kid wax on wax off approach. Like here's two saxophones. See what you can do, kid.
Like what? Exactly. I did that. Karate Kid is a good. I did feel like that. Like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, and then when you go to those recitals, you see all the other students' pieces. So I got to see like juniors and seniors. One of the kids had a saxophone quintet, and I was like, oh, how come I can't have can I have that one? Like, I don't want them to see my little two saxophone, but it did help me a lot to think about melody and phrasing and things that help me a lot now in my writing orchestras. I don't just write chords anymore. Like I really think about structure of even like contour, like what direction you want the notes to go in and how you want the melody to go, and that really helped. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So then it was basically like one major piece a year. Is that
per semester? Yeah.
Oh, per semester. Okay.
But throughout the semester, you still had other assignment pieces and small things and little assignments. But yeah, there'd be one that you'd be working on the whole semester leading up to the recital.
Okay.
Each semester. Yeah.
So then if someone wanted to get into composition, but they're not going to be able to go to university to do that, is there like software or something, or like where would you recommend someone go to like experiment with this type of stuff?
Yeah, I think so. If they are wanting to get into composition, and I would say the first thing, because one thing we had to do a lot was take a lot of theory classes. We had to take all the theory courses. I would say go to, and this is not before I say it, I'll say this is not like an indicator whether or not you'll become a good composer. But it does help to take some theory classes if you haven't. So if you haven't, you could go to like a junior college, because the teaching quality, theory is theory. So you don't have to go to a 4-year university to learn theory. You can go to a junior college because it's the same base, it's the same stuff. And in that, I would say there are some programs you can go to, and I can't think of, there's a couple on that some people sent to me. I can't think of the name of them right now, but
That's right. We can throw in the show notes later.
yeah. But yeah, you start with the theory, and then I would say it's really important to just first off just write. Before you take lessons, before you try to figure out all this other stuff, just write some stuff. Write what you like, and based on some things that and go from there. Because for me, I had some theory knowledge and everything, but everything I wrote was just before I went to college was just stuff I like to write. And
yeah.
I think for a lot of the composers who came, it was like that as well. Some of them might have some private lessons, but I didn't have any composition lessons before that. My dad would give me some tips, but he was a performance major, so he didn't have that composition knowledge. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. And then my thing, you can never beat just trying to meet people, and relationships. So in your classes, if you meet some kids who are composition majors, ask them questions. Buy an orchestration book and just ask them questions about it. Because really, that book, I still have the textbook with me, and whenever
you have it here,
it's probably in the garage because we from Virginia, it's in there. But whenever I'm working on something new, I go in that book and I look at, like, I need to be reminded of like the function of an instrument or something, or whatever, and I go back and just look at what it does, and it helps me. I would say nothing beats stuff like that, because it's just the creativity. You have the space, and you can just you don't have to worry about, because it's not like math or science where there is definitely a wrong answer, or medicine where you don't want to go into medicine just kind of figuring stuff out, but this is like you have the space to find your voice and also kind of pick up on some stuff on your own. I think that's a big way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so can you give us a couple other just fun things to try? Like you were talking about like flute with pitch percussion. Like I totally want to go try that, like on my keyboard, just like record them together and see what it sounds like. And for me, like that was a huge thing. Like probably in my like junior high range was like we got this new keyboard that could like do multi-layered recording stuff. And man, the numbers of hours, days, weeks I spent just like trying to transcribe stuff. Like, what was that sound? I think that might have been a tuba. Maybe we'll try that on a tuba or whatever. Stuff like that. What other things are like just fun things that people might not think of? Strings with sax is cool. Flute with pitch percussion. What are some other cool combinations?
Yeah, some other cool combinations. So with woodwinds again, so flute. One thing I love to do is have the flutes play staccato. So like just really short notes, like and along with that have another unpitched percussion just imitate the rhythm with them. So whether that's a snare or even a triangle, but like where you choke it so that it doesn't ring out super long. So having that with the staccato flute, sometimes the average listener doesn't even hear the percussion, but they feel something different with it. Another one of my favorites is the French horn and the cello. Again, cello in their higher range. So like the French horn, it's one of those instruments that does have a big range, but it gets way more difficult to play in the higher range unless you're a really, really good French horn player. It's tighter than the way my friend described it, it's just tighter than a trumpet. It's just harder to play than a trumpet. But if you kind of have the French horn, kind of scooping up to a high note, and you have the cellos imitate that and kind of slide up there, it's a really good timbre too. It just sounds like one of those really, really gushy, like romantic, scenes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah. Those that's my other favorite too. Yeah.
So then, like, how often do you get to compose? I got 3 questions. Maybe one of them will be interesting enough to answer. How often do you get to compose? Do you still get the same fulfillment or a lot of fulfillment out of composing something that you never hear performed by a live orchestra or whatever? And what kind of work is there for composition for someone who wants to be the next John Williams or whatever? What can they expect to gig on until their big break or whatever, or is their big break? What does that all look like?
Right. So how often would I get to compose? Not as often as I used to, and that's just because of life. I mean, when I was younger, I was homeschooled for most of my schooling, and then I went to public school my third year of high school. So
Mhm.
I was homeschooled. I would do most of my work in the afternoon, and I would spend like most of the morning just in my dad's studio or on my computer, like writing. On I had Finale at the time,
Mhm.
which is I have Sibelius now, just two different writing programs.
Do you
Uh,
prefer one over the other?
I think they're both good. I mean, I've done Sibelius now for so long. I prefer it just because I'm used
Sure.
to it. But they both have the same basic functions. If you figure out the shortcuts on the keyboards and stuff, then
Yeah.
it's for me it's not too different. But I like Sibelius,
Cool.
just because it's been a while since I went back to Finale. But yeah, it used to be every day at least 3-4 hours a day. Just because I was a kid, I got nothing
Yeah.
else. I would
Right.
do that, and I go play outside with my friends, come back, and keep going.
Yeah.
Um, but now it's probably when I have probably out on average of like an hour and a half a day or 2 hours a day, if I
Mhm.
can get 2 hours. And usually it's for other people. So I think your second question was
Like, if you don't ever hear it performed,
right.
then like, would you?
Uh,
Because if you're obviously as a kid,
yeah,
you're writing all that stuff, and
yeah,
it just exists in your head or
yeah.
something. I don't know.
Yeah. It was just when I was a kid, it was just for fun. I would love to write and just listen back on it and be like, oh, that was really cool. Maybe show my friends or something. And but the first time I actually heard something played back for me was in high school. Our jazz band, I arranged a couple of things, and that's when I was like, okay, from this day on, I want to hear my stuff in real life. I'd never, what I mean, I never
Right.
really thought about it like that. And so as soon as I got to college, I started a band, and I would write horn arrangements for the band and everything. um, and so that satisfaction is like unlike any other when it
Hmm.
comes to music. But I most of the time I get to hear what I wrote back.
Hmm.
Um, Most of the time, but there are some times especially when I write for other people, that I'll write and I'll send it to them, and I either just won't get around to asking for it, or I'll hear it like months later, like, oh yeah, I forgot that I did that.
Right.
I mean, and but yeah, I mean, I live for those moments though, when the composition comes together and the players are familiar enough with the piece so they can really feel it when they're playing it. They're not just
Right.
reading it. And those are the best moments to me. But I mean, there's a lot of work out there for composers.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm fortunate enough to I do singer songwriter stuff on the side as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
and then when I was living in California permanently, my parents and I ran a music school together. So I taught piano. So there were other things I had to bring in some money and also have some fun. But I knew that one of the things that gave me an edge as an artist was the fact that I arranged my own stuff.
Hmm.
And so I really tried to highlight that when I'm approaching venues, or when someone's approaching me about something. And so there's some good money in arranging for people. And I think before I like my dreams become the next John Williams, but until then, there's still a lot of work that people want. They love strings. A lot of singers love strings to their music, and a lot of people love having horn arrangements, or even just um, session piano work, some piano on their stuff. And
Right.
so there is it's not as, for me right now at least, it's not as frequent as like gigging just with the
Hmm.
band. But when it does come in, it kind of makes up for the time. Like it does, the money from it does make up for the time. So there is some stability in it.
Yeah.
But it's take a lot of work to kind of get your name in that space.
Hmm.
But once you're in there, it's pretty manageable because there's not a lot of people in that space.
Right. Yeah. I imagine it's like the number of people that compose well that I know versus the number of people that like play piano well. Like everybody can
Right.
play piano,
Exactly.
who can
Exactly.
arrange for some obscure set of instruments that are gonna show up for the gig or whatever. It's just, do you write a lot for the band that you're in? Is that your band, or you playing other people's music, or?
Yeah. Most of them. So I have a band called Current Personi. and I do like 85% of the writing, the composing. I do all the arranging for it. And then I say 85 because I wrote most of the songs, but my singers also write, and so sometimes they'll bring their songs in as well. And then for my own solo stuff, Jodavi, I do all the writing. And we do some covers, but writing. And then I just recently started having a horn player friend of mine do some of my horn arrangements, just because I like having. It's different having another ear come in and do some of your work for you sometimes, to not have your hand in every single pot.
Right.
And because he is a horn player, he'll have a take on something that sometimes for me is more authentic horn wise. And so I'm not afraid to be like, okay, you know what, I know I'm an arranger, but I want you to do this one, you know.
Right.
But yeah, most of the stuff I write and arrange and compose for the bands. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And we'll put links into the show notes to all that stuff, and hopefully a couple of the composition books and stuff, and some software we talked about. Real quick, so yeah, two last questions real quick if you got time. Do you copyright all your stuff, or how does that all work?
Yeah, I do. So I used to do like the poor man's copyright. You know, I would email the stuff to myself, and I made sure I had the original files and all that. But I do. No, actually, I shouldn't. Right now, I still just do the poor man's thing. I just keep everything in an email or on a Google Drive, the original like studio files and email documents and everything. I do have everything published on BMI, so I do keep that all there. It's for licensing and everything. But as far as copywriting, I'm still working on like getting that officially in there. I guess I'll have time for that though. But yeah.
I get that question a lot from students, and you gave the perfect answer to back up what I've been telling them. So appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
Everyone wants like have the official copyright on their stuff, and for the majority of stuff, I feel like even if you have the copyright, it's probably not going to come up. And if you can prove that you already wrote the thing, then you already wrote the thing. So
you have an email saying, hey, here's your song. There you go.
Right.
Like,
right.
You're fine. Like you're not going to get, no one can steal your stuff if you do that. Yeah.
And then you tell me off the camera that you grew up with 6 kids.
Yeah.
What number?
I'm number 2.
Okay.
And I have 5 sisters, so I'm the only boy.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time growing up. I mean, it was there. It was great. I love big families, and there's always, even now, we're all kind of back home for a little bit. My youngest sisters are in college, but they're back for the summer, and then my oldest sister will be back soon. She works in New York now, so the house will be full again, and we always love that. There's always stuff going on. But yeah, having a boy though now with me and my wife, it's like yes, okay, we're starting off on the right foot. We got it.
Awesome.
No, it's good.
Do any of them play?
Yeah, all of them play a little bit. They're all in the arts. My older sister does film work in New York, so she works for a company out there. She has like documentaries and things like that. But all my younger sisters play like piano. Some play guitar. One plays violin. The other plays cello. So and they all sing. So they when we get together, we'll like. My dad plays, so we'll like sing stuff together, or we'll sometimes we'll go to people's houses and afterwards we'll all sing with them or something. That's fun, growing up in a musical family. Just makes things more interesting, more fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. Well, we'll put links up to your stuff, and appreciate your time so much. And almost always there's like some stragglers that didn't hear the announcement, whatever. So hopefully we can send you a question or two from people, follow up on some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thank you,
your time,
man. I appreciate it.
All right. Good luck out there.
All right, man. You take care.
All right.